Just can you just make it make sense? Hey, welcome to this episode of To the Contrary podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes, and I am joined by the Honorable Harry Litman, who I'm hoping can explain things that are going on. First of all, welcome to the podcast, Harry. It's good to see you again.
Charlie, it's always so great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So I want to spend a lot of time talking about the Comey indictment. You have been all over it, and I want to walk through some of the stuff you have done. But I want to start with a couple of other things. First of all, like just a few minutes before our recording, we get the story the U.S. military has blown up another boat off Venezuela, killing 4 men. Pete Hegseth accused the 4 dead men of having been smuggling narcotics without offering evidence. It's a pattern here. Also asserted that they were affiliated with one of the cartels and gangs the administration has designated as a terrorist organization, but did not specify which. So the total is now up to 21 people who have been killed in these raids. And I want to read you just this paragraph from the New York Times account. It is illegal for the military to deliberately kill civilians, even suspected criminals, who are not directly participating in hostilities. The Trump administration apparently wants to get around that by telling Congress this week that Trump had determined the United States was engaged in an armed conflict with the cartels that his administration has designated as terrorist groups, and therefore the people crewing the vessels are unlawful combatants, not civilians. And as the Times points out, the legitimacy of the idea that Trump can treat trafficking as a kind of hostility or armed attack that can trigger military action has been sharply contested. Now, just give me your sense about this, because so we now have the president sitting on the golden throne, and you're saying, I have determined that we're basically at war with these people. Does that give him legal cover, a legal fig leaf to keep blowing up these boats, Harry?
Not unless the courts wind up saying, which is sort of my prime fear, Charlie, that sure seems suspect, but we will defer to him. That's the biggest risk out there, because the short answer is no. The longer answer, I would commend people to Just Security and Marty Lederman. But basically, this is the same kind of fantasy that they've tried again and again, including, recall, and in the Alien Enemies Act, they say, we are really at war with these people. It's an armed conflict. The same thing they've just done in Chicago, I expect we'll get there, where they say, members of a gang frequent this building, therefore we can treat it as we would a place in Pakistan. But as you say, the rules are really strict about when you can actually kill civilians, and the purpose that they're trying to make of this metaphor might be a nice way to put it, but really it's a fantasy. It's a cartoon version. It's to say, see those fishermen out there plying their trade? You didn't know it, but they're actually unlawful combatants. Why is that? They're part of this big army, and you didn't know it, but we're at war with them. And what's the evidence of that? Well, the main evidence, I think, is going to turn out to be, the president of the United States, said so. And, that's right. And there are certain doctrines that generally do give the president deference. And one of the big challenges to the courts, it's a nice way to put it, is what do you do with sort of programs of deference when you have a president who wakes up lying and lies all day? There's just really no reason. It's farcical to say that this is some army we're at war with. We would know that. And by the way, even that is sort of a kind of analogy in the law. It's really supposed to be, from some of these statutes, we're at war with France, we're at war with Germany. Yeah. But you can, if you can construct the argument that this is the equivalent, you might look, for instance, to 9/11, where we at war with Al-Qaeda. Right. I think that's a fair argument. But are we at war here with people who are either doing nothing and are totally innocent, or at most are committing crimes of drug distribution, not war against the U.S. military and the like? So it's all really bogus. could get nowhere except the risk is some kind of doctrine of deference. And, we're talking about killing of innocents, pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, the problem is with strict rules is they don't enforce themselves. They have to be enforced somehow. So it is going to be interesting to see what
and
the
often
courts
they
say.
have to be enforced by the DOJ coming in, and
right,
that doesn't
which
happen
is kind
in
of the problem
in this president's world. That's right.
You made a really interesting point there, which was should the courts show deference to this administration? Now, there's a long tradition of that, like the courts showing deference to things that the president did at the federal government. And this is one of those moments saying, are you paying attention to what this administration is doing, the way this administration is behaving? Do they deserve that kind of deference? And I agree with you. I think no. So let's talk about Chicago, because I'll tell you, I spent the last couple of hours watching the videos and reading about it. And I find it at the same time horrifying and puzzling, and there are some historical parallels here, which we can get to in a moment. Let me just read you an interesting article by Garrett Graff, who summarizes some of this. And again, I think probably a lot of our listeners are familiar, but the details are extraordinary. Chicago media this week has been ablaze with horrifying stories from Monday's ICE raid on a South Shore apartment building. DHS has bragged the raid ended with 37 arrests, but on-the-scene witness reporting describes a level of scale and brutality we have never seen in ICE's raids so far. ICE blew in doors, handcuffed American citizens, rousted people from their beds in the middle of the night, and zip-tied children as they waited to figure out who was undocumented and who was a U.S. citizen. Some U.S. citizens evidently were handcuffed and detained for between 3 and 5 hours. They were terrified. The kids were crying. People were screaming. They looked very distraught. I was out there crying when I saw this little girl come around the corner because they were bringing the kids down too, had them zip tied to each other. One resident recalled to local media. That's all I kept asking. Where are the parents? One of them literally laughed. One of the agents literally laughed. He was standing right there. He said, "Fuck them kids." Some residents of the building have reported apartments were gratuitously trashed, property missing. So here's my question. What judge would have issued this warrant? What kind of Graff says this is a once unthinkable bright line that's been crossed. There is no warrant any judge could give, at least in theory, that any reasonable judge would ever sign that gives federal authorities the right to break down the doors of every apartment in a building in search of undocumented immigrants. What do you think, Harry?
Nor did one do it here. This is, it really is, some of this just washes over us, Charlie, and you think that sounds bad. This is one that it's making war on Americans. There's just no way around. This is boots on the ground, Tiananmen Square first. The law. Guess what? There's a difference here, and you hear about it sometime, between a so-called judicial warrant, where someone has said there's going to be evidence of a crime there. You can go in. There's a whole other point about what force you can use, but these are not those. This is just the executive has said, we think maybe somebody around there may be unlawfully in the country. Go and do your worst. That's for starters. Point number two is, even they say, Homan on TV, and this is the controversy about the green light that they got at the Supreme Court with the Justice Kavanaugh argument. Even they themselves say, the most you can do, and the most we're doing, they say, is go up to citizens and ask a question or two, a so-called Terry stop. And if that ripens into probable cause, then you can arrest them. Nothing remotely like this, just a complete orgy of Fourth Amendment violation. They didn't ask anyone any questions. They didn't have any information. They came in, rappelling down, banging the doors, kind of like when we went after Osama bin Laden, right? Really treating everyone in that building. And what's the pretext for it? Again, the same fantasy. They say, we think that members of Nicaragua don't even live there, but they frequent it. But it doesn't matter as the first point. I mean, the thing that is so horrifying and reflexively kind of nauseating to make you think, is this the United States of America?
Yes, exactly.
Is that they made war on these folks.
Right.
No even attempt to comply with the basics of the Fourth Amendment. There's an argument you need particularized suspicion, right? You need some reason to think the guy in 3A
I would have thought
is
so.
actually staying there. Not even a question of that. Just like battering rams, bang down the door, bring them out. So both improper arrest and unlawful and unreasonable use of force. Honestly, this is the sort of thing you would do against enemies at wartime, not U.S. citizens.
Yeah, what's the whole
specter
helicopter
of it is grotesque. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what's with the Black Hawk helicopters and the rappelling down? How was that necessary? It felt like they were, doing this cosplaying, this or cinematic, strutting that seems to be the signature of whether it's Pete Hegseth or Donald Trump or Kash Patel. Right. By the way, there's a
both
slight
are basically
digression.
saying they take the soldiers there and say, here, go practice your trade on the people of Chicago. And
that's what Hegseth. Right. I mean, that's what they said at Quantico,
this
right?
gets a little Tony, but I just want to say, in terms of use of force by a government, there really are two completely separate models. Somebody in the country did something wrong. They are insiders still. They're part of us. You give them rights. You have a whole bit. That's one. Then the other is you bring the military in, people who we don't even know they've done wrong or not, but you can shoot them and kill them because it's that kind of force. They absolutely were taking U.S. citizens and treating them the way you would treat, possible Al-Qaeda people in Afghanistan. This is in America, in one building. It is really foul.
I mean, the transformation of ICE into this sort of lawless brute squad, is really disturbing. And speaking of Chicago, we have these incidents where they've actually shot and killed people, and unlike most police officers, they're not wearing body cams. It almost feels as if they are this supra-legal organization where they come in with a completely different set of rules. The Chicago Police Department never would have been able to. Yes, obviously fear. And
one more, just a quick point on that, Charlie. I don't mean to be interrupting, but we now know there are a lot of ICE imposters out there looking to make trouble. So, I mean, citizens really have a right to need to know, who are you? What brings you here? May I see your ID? There are strangers out there, that are literally mugging people by putting ICE on the back of their cars.
So I agree. I think that the people need to look at these pictures and go, is this America? Does this look like America? Right. Does this look like the America you want it to be? On the other hand, there is American precedence for this. And I would urge people to Google Palmer raids. There's a great book called American Midnight, which describes what happened in the first Red Scare, which took place like in 1919 under Woodrow Wilson, of all people. Yes. And the Palmer raids are named after.
Wrong, and it was wrong, we now think. Right. They thought it was a true foreign invasion. This is bullshit. They're using the kind of legal premise.
That was bullshit too, though.
We're at war with these guys.
Yeah.
It's a lie.
I mean, look. Okay, so the Palmer raids are named after Mitchell Palmer, who was Woodrow Wilson's attorney general, who was the Red Scare. They went after communists. Apparently, by some estimates, they arrested as many as 10,000 people over 40 cities, often without warrants. And sometimes radicals were arrested simply for being members of perfectly legal organizations. So it was one of our first big witch hunts. And it happened, and weirdly enough, some people still think that Woodrow Wilson is a progressive icon. But it is terrifying. And I guess the real question, Harry, is are they going to get away with this? Okay, I mean, I agree. I mean, obviously there's real questions about the legality about it. But so who's going to stop them?
Yeah, and let's go to the Palmer raid. It's a really good example.
Yeah,
there was a surfeit of patriotism at the time. You're probably a student of it, but you weren't supposed to say Frankfurters, because that was
right,
and you weren't supposed to say French fries. I mean, people were nuts. But the verdict of history, I think, has been very certain that wow, did we lose our way? Now, you and I and everybody are kind of looking with terror at what will history be, and in a year or two, will we be past this, or will we somehow have been at the end of the American experiment? Not to get too dramatic, but I think those are the stakes. If we're past it, my strong suspicion is that this will go down like the Palmer raids as a time of terrible excess driven from the top. And it'll be a moment of calumny, but we're living it, Charles.
Right.
Man,
that was my question.
Yeah.
So for history's fine.
Yeah.
But in the short term, so what? I mean,
right. I agree.
Who stops it? I mean, I notice people are going like, what can I do as a citizen here? What should the governors be doing? What should the mayors be doing? Because look, what happened in Chicago is just dry run for what's going to happen in all of these other cities. Trump made it very clear when he was talking to the generals earlier in the week that he was going to use the invasion of American cities as a training ground for the U.S. military, as if posse comitatus did not exist at all.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, so it is.
And by the way, always against the few instances we have of legitimate exercise of these sorts of emergency powers, the local authorities said, please come in for a couple of days feds, and things are kind of crazy. Help us get it right. Each and every one of these, starting here with Pritzker, but also Newsom, and where they're doing it, the locals are saying, keep the hell out, please. You're just grandstanding and making people terrified here, and they're right.
Well, the visuals are not subtle. I'm sure you've seen the video. I'm sure people who are listening to this have seen the visuals of these guys in full tactical gear. I mean, they look like, I don't even know how to describe, their masks, there's helmets, the full tackle, as if you were going into a combat situation. So the intimidation and the fear are very much part of it. Now, slight digression.
It's purposeful. It really is.
Have you seen this challenge coin that Kash Patel is handing out? It's of the Punisher. I mean, these guys are all like 12-year-old boys, but also
that is part of it, right? They're, they are like Hegseth and his tattoos of the whole thing. It's the least grave part of the problem, but they're like, junior high twerks in addition to everything else. And they're, they're low class but yeah, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I mean, of course, they do this to trigger the libs. Okay, so I think people should be triggered by the rappelling into people's homes, because that is a red line. On the other hand, watching them, play these juvenile games, handing out cartoon character challenge coins, that doesn't trigger anybody. It just makes you look like a complete asshat. So, segue here, because you have been doing yeoman service in walking through the Comey indictment. Now, that was a week ago, more than a week ago. Yeah. We have learned a great deal since. So I don't know where you want to start on this, Harry, but a week ago, that felt like a turning point. That felt like a red line, both for the politics of retaliation and revenge, but also about the incredibly shitty way they went about doing it. So give me
that's where, if you don't mind, Charlie, where I'd like to start. So I went through many aspects of it, but I always keep putting in, because my concern from day one, the day when it happened, I was on one of the TV shows, and people said, "Are you okay? You look so sober." But I'm really at pains to say, as a former DOJer, this isn't like a pretty bad thing. This is rock bottom. If we live in a society where someone can be prosecuted without evidence, the worst thing any DOJ person can do, it's not just the Constitution, but everything you swear to. It's the worst thing you can do. Anybody of any stripe would say it. And moreover, it's done because it's ordered from on highest, and simply as a political reprisal, with no argument that the things that Trump himself said, I haven't paid attention to it, but they look guilty. Yeah. In other words, it's clearly done for simply political reprisal. I'm just here to say that is rock bottom. DOJ is completely, there's nothing worse than that. next to, ultra virus, like just taking somebody and kidnapping them or giving them a shot of poison on the bench. In terms of the pseudo legal thing, the DOJ is screwed up in a million ways, but this millionth and first, trumped up charges because the president insists on it when they're not there. And for political reprisal, my main message has been to try to say, everybody out there, don't just lump that in. This is absolute zero, ninth circle of hell. So that is where I've also, even today, I had like, could he be impeached for it, different stuff, but I just keep wanting to really push that. And I'm scared that people see it as a kind of legal, oh, that's another kind of pushing of the envelope. There's no pushing of the envelope.
Okay,
this is the worst thing a Department of Justice can do.
Yeah. Okay, let's drill down on that, because you know, what is it that distinguishes this case from other cases of egregious overreach? What is the heart of your critique here? They say that he lied under oath to Congress. That's illegal, right? So I'm playing devil's advocate here. So what makes this different?
It's the knowledge. That's right. I mean, it's the fact that that's a lie, and they have all that analysis going forward. It's the knowledge that they actually, as is required, don't have a crime to prove, don't have something that they think they can show by probable cause. They're asserting this, but it's a lie. And it's just the worst kind of, it's Kafkaesque, right? This is an innocent person. Then all the other reasons go to it as well. But I'm, within the culture of DOJ, if anyone of any stripe ever suggested, well, it's not quite there, but he'll probably plead guilty or something. You just couldn't be.
So what's going to happen with this case? Yeah. So what's going to happen with this case?
He's going to win 6 different ways. It'll be up to him. It's interesting. In his statement, he seemed to be kind of spoiling for a court battle and thinking of that as the most, as the strongest kind of proof. And I think, look, even the indictment with the one-sided, and we haven't even seen it yet, presentation by Lindsay Halligan, who didn't know where the door is, was they got 14 votes, a bare majority of people to say there's probable cause, and so guilt beyond a reason. I don't think they could ever prove it, and there's a lot of different problems. But the question is, will he want, for his own vindication, to have a jury release it, because he knows, everyone knows, Pat Fitzgerald, his great lawyer, knows that if the Judge Nachmanoff, dismisses it for any of 3 or 4 really good reasons, including selective prosecution, at least Trump and MAGA will say crazy liberal judge, et cetera, et cetera. Nevertheless, his lawyer, who's great, has to be thinking, Jim, we can't get cute here. We got some really good pretrial opposition. We got to take him. So he's going to be arraigned next week, and I think some very powerful pretrial motions to dismiss are gonna, fly within a day or two after.
Well, let's just go back to the backstory. I think everybody knows what the story is. Trump essentially orders, I want the head of James Comey, and the acting U.S. attorney says, no, there's no crime, there's no evidence. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah,
and he's fired.
You want me to throw my license in the Potomac? Yeah,
and
so basic. I just can't.
Then this again.
You won't do it. I will fire you. That's already 80% toward absolute abomination, right?
No, is this something that? The judge reads the papers. I mean, the judge knows what happens 100%. Here. He knows what DOJ says, and then
this judge, by the way, he's got a sort of defense background. Everybody. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Of course, he reads the paper.
So then they appoint this 36-year-old Trump loyalist, Lindsay Halligan, who had never prosecuted a case, as far as I can tell, has made very minimal court appearances. And it sounds like
that's an insurance lawyer in Florida. Yeah.
Even Pam Bondi's attorney general kind of sounds like they threw her in the deep end here. And I mean, talk about somebody who is out of their depth.
That is, it's a really interesting point. I mean, it's malpractice, right? Before you would actually go to a grand jury first, you'd have been in the office and learned all these things and gone to baby prosecutor school and 8 months. And something's going to be pretty interesting. I mean, she knew that she had to deliver the scalp of Comey. Who we're going to get the transcript of her in the grand jury, and I think it's going to be riddled with elementary errors, some of which may give rise to dismissal themselves. But the really interesting thing, and we just don't know yet. There's the facts are consistent. What the hell is she doing there alone? If I was a U.S. attorney, I would never go to the grand jury alone. It's really possible that the entire office, and I used to work in that office. It's a button-down, very professional office. And I'm sure the people who published that paper the day before were the leaders of the office. It's quite possible that right now there's a sort of full-on revolt, and they're not going to be able to get people to try the case. Maybe they bring them in from another place. But if that happens, and we ought to get a real good hint of that on the 9th, next Thursday, that in terms of a vote of not just no confidence, but lawlessness in what Bondi and Trump were doing. Like, I don't want to have my fingerprints anywhere near this. And I think for Halligan, it was one of the pieces I wrote this week. She reminds me of the Jenna Ellis and John Eastman and Ken Cheeseburger people.
Things haven't worked out well for them.
They had not all of them. They've $1 million in sanctions, disbar, etc. They made this Faustian bargain to be, near the president for a while, and they're professional, roadkill, all of them. I think she's completely ruined her career. So you've asked. Well, the grand jury said it. Within the legal system, she put her signature on this thing, asserting stuff that I don't think they can prove. A scandal.
So this is exactly where I wanted to go, which was the problem they have is finding lawyers who are willing to do all of this. We've seen this story where a lot of the career lawyers, and I think there are probably still quite a few of them who are like waiting, watching, keeping their heads down, and yet if push comes to shove, they do have to weigh this, right? Totally. In Trump 1.0, if we were having a discussion about the norms in the Justice Department, I could imagine having a conversation where, the traditions and the norms are so powerful and the members of the Department of Justice would never go along with all of this. And now we're really kind of, everybody's going to be having this test. At what point do lawyers realize, okay, this Faustian bargain doesn't work? I may get invited to Mar-a-Lago, but my legal career, my legal reputation is absolutely destroyed. I will be toxic. What is the thinking among the lawyers going there? I mean, if you're a career Department of Justice lawyer, you might think, okay, I can't be part of this. Are you worried about trying to get a job with one of these big law firms that Trump has also been attacking? I mean, I'm trying to loop back to all of that. You're not going to be able to walk into one of the law firms that has, bent the knee to Donald Trump, right? So what's happening? What's going on?
So look, let me start by saying there's not full transparency here, but it's one of my number one sort of obsessions is trying to figure out. We know that a third of the leadership of the is already gone. And when those third, 10 among them are the people in any U.S. attorney's office, there's certain, most respected assistants people go to for the judgment. So just from that, the DOJ is rudderless. That's point one. Point two, I do know for a fact the place is completely freaked out, right? You have,
legitimately so.
They are absolutely, if I say something in the hall, will it get back to maximum leader 1984 style, and what do I do? Point three, you can find this out without even going to DOJ. It's a very hard time to get a job. They are flooded with resumes. Everybody wants to go, but firms aren't there to take it. And then point four, people are genuinely afraid of getting commands to do work that they don't feel they're going to be able to do ethically, that they can't get it. So my sense, Charlie, is it's really at what point we passed that point already. It's already sort of a terrible, like, post-Armageddon zombie land. And if in the best case scenario, every Bondi and company just sort of vaporized painlessly, tomorrow you would encounter an absolute, ravaged landscape and people walking around dazed. And, norms, which ran the place, it would have been inconceivable for the president to have spoken to anyone about a pending actual case. Inconceivable. That's all. Everything has been blown to shit. And the restoration of norms is the work of a few generations, right? So I don't think that's an overstatement. My best guess on this is really bad. And a minimum is quite. But when just thinking about that one fact, a third of, and then there, public integrity, the crown of the jewel, 2 people left. Civil rights division, nobody left. Voting rights section, it's gone. So, even the remaining ones, and you'll hear some of them say, well, maybe I can temporize. Not so much anymore. They're just like, man, this is a nightmare.
Hey, maybe help me out on this one, because I'm thinking about a story that broke today. Speaking of this kind of this weird Stalinist Orwellian world that they live in, where senior person in the national security division is fired after a single social media post accused him of being too close to Comey or defending him, and he put out a letter. It's kind of an ominous letter, right? You know who I'm talking about here? Talking about his firing, that he can lose his job based on one inaccurate social media post.
Yeah. And by the way, they're canvassing it. What did I just see? Oh, I think it was a military person just got fired because he had a rainbow flag on his desk. But the combination of the vigilance, right? They are absolutely fine-tooth combing all the sort of stuff. And another thing we used to take for granted, there's such a thing as viewpoint discrimination, and a government can't act about a certain viewpoint. It could say things like in general political speech. Of course, this government actually is encouraging I don't know if you got that. This is one of the mind-bending facts of the last couple of days. You log on to the Department of Education or DOJ, and you get
HUD. Yeah.
Right, you get some kind of political message touting a current program. So yeah, I talked, a couple minutes ago about the paranoia, and it's just true. And also there's another aspect of it that I think is part and parcel of what is, and maybe this isn't so unusual for authoritarians. In addition to the nastiness and severity, there's a kind of a fecklessness about us. So often you have Laura Loomer goes into the Oval Office and says something bad, or you have 22-year-old kids for Doge saying, in other words, something like this just happened, he escaped. But the very competent head of the NSA, his, head was on the chopping block for, basically because children are just told, if you see the word diversity, get rid. So on top of everything else, there's such a lack of nuance or understanding about what government does. So all of that together. But the law is so clear, you can't single out people because of their views and sack them or whatever. You're absolutely right. They're saying, well, try to stop us. And so far, they've had these series of, to me, pretty outrageous victories of the Supreme Court, where the court's just saying, well, for now, we'll let you do it. And for now is the whole deal. That'll be months and months, and by then everyone's gone, and you can't unscramble the eggs.
People have to go on with their lives. And again, this comes back to the point that you made earlier about the courts giving deference to this administration. And I'm guessing that I'm certainly hoping that at least at the district and the appellate levels, that the judges are taking this into account. I mean, I just imagine how hard it must be to be a be a Department of Justice lawyer appearing in an actual federal court where you have to swear to things.
It's so bad, Charlie.
And the judges, ask you, questions, and that if you say, like, I don't know the answer to that, I don't know why we're bringing this charge, you're out. You're going to be fired. So, believe it or not, I have one even scarier question to raise with you. In my podcast the other day,
I'm ready.
Yeah. I wish people could see the video of this. I mean, I know some of you are listening on podcasts, but I think we're like 2 minutes away from Harry actually tearing his hair out. I mean, honestly, I can tell that you're, yes.
Maybe I can just break into sobs. They'll hear that. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Somebody accused you of being too sober, and it's like, man, you got the hands, it is going. It's hard to convey.
Honest to God, really, really, really bad. You couldn't have imagined worse when you thought about it in January. Anyway, okay, but here you got the biggest nightmare of all. I'm ready.
The Insurrection Act.
Yeah.
I was talking to Olivia Troy, and we both agreed that there's no question about it, given his use of pretext and making stuff up as he goes along, that Trump is going to invoke the Insurrection Act, which David French has described as the most dangerous law in America. There was an opportunity at one time to maybe modify it or repeal it, but it's on the books, and it gives Trump massive power. So just tell me about what it would mean, because I think people are going to be shocked when it happens. They shouldn't be. I think it ought to be baked in right now. That at some point he's going to invoke that act, and what power does Harry's just hanging his head.
That's right. And everybody focus on elections here for emergency powers.
Yeah.
First, it's a little bit, how extreme it is, I think, is illustrated by the fact that he hasn't done it so far. He keeps on the sort of intermediate levels of authority that the courts rule he doesn't have. But take a step back. In a well-functioning republic where things are going pretty good 99% of the time, you're sitting down and trying to figure out a whole government plan. Okay, guys, what are we going to do when really, for some reason, there's an insurrection? And you put in place certain powers. But what will be the case? I want to go back. I keep going back in my lawyerly way to the deference question. And by the way, where, you said courts of appeals, Chuck Breyer made a very strong opinion about why they were violating the section, but the Court of Appeals 2-1 reversed them. So it's not, there are certain courts that are going to be different from others, but the basic, you understand why it's there, back to Locke and everything. An executive sometimes needs special powers to quell an insurrection. 2, they're going to lie about it, sure as shit, and call it an insurrection when it doesn't exist. 3, the pivotal question, as it often is to maybe always is to me, is whether courts will say, and the Supreme Court will give some blather about how we have to defer to that determination, or whether they'll do the right thing and say, is there an insurrection? And 4th, last point is, will he be able to use whatever powers are green-lighted to totally mess with the election and basically do undercover bad law?
That's
what
the
he
most
couldn't do in 2020.
This is the scariest scenario. So give us a review, though. What are the powers that he has under the Insurrection Act that he does not have right now? Because I remember talking about this with David French, and one of the things that he was warning about was that under this law, there is limited ability of the courts actually to intervene. So this takes us into a really dangerous. So when he opens that box, Charlie, what does he have? Yeah,
Tiananmen Square, boots on the street doing law enforcement. Bringing the military. Yeah. Yes, and if there were an insurrection, you can imagine. Yeah, but so boots on the street, doing law enforcement. And by the way, we've tiptoed around this over this last conversation, which is always great. Thanks again for inviting me. But ICE, where are they going to be? They are shaping up as his own kind of Gestapo that nevertheless he can call regular law enforcement and send out to bash heads. So the basic idea is the Fourth Amendment still exists for what it's worth, which is nothing with this gang. Look at Chicago. But, you know, the main thing to think of is that ultimate dystopia of boots on the ground.
Yeah, that's and you make an interesting point that as an indication of how extreme it is, the fact that he hasn't done it. You know that he's going to do it, but at some point. And I think that
I'll bet they timing it in terms of the election, actually. When to
see, this is the I was skeptical of the people who had like the most apocalyptic view of what he's going to do. I actually think that we need to exercise our imagination and to be prepared for it, because I don't think there's any question he's going to invoke it. The question is, will he do it with the elections? Will to affect the elections? Will the judges continue to defer to him? Because if the president of the United States says, I have determined that there is an active insurrection and therefore I can do it. Yeah. The question is, will the courts second guess the executive? And based on a lot of things the Supreme Court has done, I am not completely confident.
In my nerdy lawyerly way, thanks for having me on as a lawyer, this is the number one thing, legal question that keeps me up at night. This is where the friggin' American experiment may actually go up or down.
You know, it's interesting. We have used this term. I probably used the term, American experiment, hundreds of times over the last 30 or 40 years. And it's after a while, you can kind of get numb to it, or it becomes a cliche. The reality is, it is an experiment. And the thing about experiments is they are not guaranteed to succeed. And I think that we're seeing right now is that this is an experiment, and it is all coming together for this 250th
experiment in the limitation of tyranny and absolute power, in the hope that certain provisions like separation of powers can do it. And it's looking like maybe they can't with this guy. Yeah.
Well, okay. So my plan to deal with this, having spent this time being utterly terrified by you, is, and everybody has to have a plan. I think that everybody is like, okay, so what do we do? How do we react to this? And my plan, Harry, and I would recommend that you follow my lead on all of this, is to go out for some excellent margaritas. There is a margarita.
And of course, in Wisconsin, it's already 4:15, and as I recall, they eat dinner there at 5. So it's probably margarita hour. I'm at 2 p.m. myself.
No. See, it is happy hour, and this is Wisconsin. Yeah. So, and again, I'm not urging everyone to go out and get margaritas. Yeah. If beer is your drink of choice, cognac, I don't know.
But a nice little Sauvignon might not do it for the kind of serious.
See, this is facing,
right? Yeah,
I've noticed that I drink less wine now, because wine just is not it does not meet the moment. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, it's 2025, and we need to meet the moment.
Need it, yeah.
No.
So true.
So margaritas.
Well, I'm in California, land of great tequila near Mexico. So on our next time, I'd love to do this regularly, and I think we're going to try. I think the bosses of us, our producers, say, let's do it. So I'll try to bring some pretty good tequila to the table.
Okay, that's good. And I think it's it's middle of the afternoon, California, might as well. It's Friday. What can we say? People are going to be listening to it over the weekend, but at least know that we have a plan. We do have a plan. Thank you all for listening to this episode of To the Contrary Podcast. You know why we do this, because this and a couple of tequilas I'm about to have remind us that we are not the crazy ones. Thank you.